So with gambling, you had your story with your brother. Can you just tell us a little bit about that, because it's a devastating story?
Yeah, sure. So I lost my brother to gambling-related suicide just over 2 years ago. He had been gambling for around 8 years, although we didn't know that he was gambling for the last 6 years. He was gambling purely on football. He was a huge football fan. He loved the game. He was a passionate fan of Liverpool. And unfortunately, that passion turned into a real tragic loss because he became so consumed by the gambling that he couldn't watch the game and avoid it. It was everywhere in advertising, on TV, on shirts, within the stadium. So Ollie felt that he had to take his own life. He was riddled with guilt and shame. He felt that it was his fault, that it was a personal failure in him. And I think that's one of the hardest things for us to process as a family, is that we found that people just didn't understand what had happened to him. People often assume that when somebody dies because of gambling, it's related to debt, and that it's because of spiralling debt that they can't control, when in fact it was actually the psychological harm that caused Ollie to take his life. And so for us, the advertising and sport in particular is something we really want to address, because we feel that anyone who's battling gambling and trying to cope with their recovery journey shouldn't be wired with such an extent of advertising.
Right, thank you. And the word addiction, it almost stereotypically puts the victim in a bad light.
Yeah.
So what do you think that addiction is the right word? Because it almost puts the blame on the person rather than the gambling company.
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge that Ollie was targeted directly by the gambling companies. They have highly addictive products, and they continue to target people even when they know that they're experiencing harm. We know that when they acknowledge that somebody is gambling frequently, they continue to push them with free bets, sign-up offers, bonuses. So yeah, I think absolutely there needs to be a shift away from that individual responsibility, that personal failure, to accountability by the gambling operators for what they're doing and the lack of care that they're giving to people experiencing harm.
Thank you. So from next season, the Premier League clubs aren't allowed to have the betting sponsors on the front of their shirt, but they're still allowed it on the sleeves. Do you reckon that's a good move, or do you think it's still visible, so it's still there?
Well, I think it's progress, because the front of the shirt is seen everywhere. It's seen in video games, it's seen in media. But if you get rid of that, but then still have it on the side of the shirt, there's an argument that makes that kind of redundant, because a gambling advertisement is harmful there and it's there. So we would obviously advocate for no gambling advertising on any part of the football.
Do you think it's just be something that it's not advertised, but if people find it, then they find it, and that's fine to a certain extent?
I think we need to get to a point where there's a regulated gambling industry and informed adults can gamble on safe products if they want to, but no one should be encouraged to gamble, especially those people that experience gambling.
And a lot of Premier League clubs, I think Wolves, Everton, Burnley, they have unlicensed companies on the front of their shirt.
Yeah.
How is that allowed?
I don't know how it's allowed. It's a scandal, really, especially because there's well-documented evidence of the practices of these companies, but there is currently a consultation by the government, so there is a chance that those unlicensed operators will be removed from advertising in football, and obviously we would support it.
Right, thank you. So there's a statistic that we heard earlier, 86% of all the profits that gambling companies make are from only 5% of their gamblers. What does that tell you about the mentality of the companies, the betting companies?
Well, it's 86% of the online profits comes from 5% of the customers. I think it tells you quite a lot, because it shows you that their whole business model is based on addiction. So that alone says how harmful and dangerous it is potentially. With such a small amount of customers providing such a large amount of the revenue, it gives them no impetus to want to reform and to actually stamp out addiction.
Yeah, and do you think there is a real statistic, because obviously there's some unlicensed companies as well on the black market that obviously the statistics might not take into account?
What's that? Say that again, sorry.
So the black market, those statistics cover the black market as well?
No, that's just the regulated market. So there's then people, when they become addicted, they can then exclude themselves from their gambling company, but then they can also then use black market products. But it always, most 9 times out of 10 will start first on the legal market. That's when people usually become addicted. The black market comes afterwards.
So then that statistic at the start, do you reckon the figure might be even higher than that one?
The amount of people, well, it's from the regulated market. So, but yeah, the amount of people actually being harmed is probably higher than we think, because you've also got people in the black market.
Right, thank you.